Redfall, Syria's Game of the Year contender. That is one interesting preview that came about, 6 or 7 weeks ago. And right now, Redfall is everything but that, and it's being mocked at every opportunity. Look at these Hulk hands. I really don't know what happened with the character design of this game. To be fair, though, I don't know what happened with the overall design of Redfall. It makes absolutely no sense. To be fair, though, much of the game makes absolutely no sense. But there has been a lot of other gaming news going on, such as Kotaku getting banned by, I guess, Nintendo. They didn't get pre-release coverage for the new Zelda game, so they blasted Nintendo on Twitter, one of the Kotaku editors making a comparison to the bad guys of World War II. I can't even say it because YouTube will demonetize the video, but that is one heck of a leap to make. And then there obviously has been just the norm in gaming news, which is Activision pulling off their usual nonsense with pay-to-win bundles for DMZ mode in, I think, Modern Warfare 2 right now. And they're also recycling Modern Warfare 2019 skins, so just business as usual, I guess. Now, we have had some rather interesting revelations, some very encouraging news, such as the new Superman game being hinted by Warner Brothers Discovery. In a recent conference call, David Zaslav talked about Superman, the overall IP, and he said the following: "When we launch a product on Max or HBO, and when we have a game, that game belongs to us. But now there's this in-betweener. It may be in the next couple of years that we launch a Superman movie, and people spend more time, and there's more economics of people just hanging out in the Superman world and universe," and this is clearly hinting at a game. And to be fair, right now we could have had an awesome Superman game by Rocksteady, but that was rejected by Warner Brothers, I think 8 or so years ago. And now we have the Suicide Squad, which is a live service looter shooter coming maybe sometime next year, and hopefully it won't have that horrible launch similar to Marvel's Avengers and all these other live service looter shooters. But from the gameplay and everything that we've seen and all the chaos that has happened reportedly behind the scenes at Rocksteady, I think that's the road that we're headed for. Now, there's also been some unfortunate news. We've been talking a lot about Microsoft lately, but Sony did shut down Concrete Genie studio Pixel Opus. I think I said that right. The studio had been working on a collaboration with Sony Pictures Animation, and this does point to a problem with Sony, and that is the need for these big blockbuster releases. And if one of these studios can't deliver on that, they're pretty much thrown to the shredder. That is something that we saw with Sony Japan a couple of years ago, in which that studio was absolutely gutted. Just very unfortunate seeing some of these studios not being able to flourish. Now, on the plus side, well, at least for PlayStation fans, it does look like there is some more third-party exclusivity going to be coming to the platform in the future in the form of some Konami properties. That includes Metal Gear Solid 3, Silent Hill, and possibly Castlevania, according to Windows Central's Jez Corden. Obviously, this is right now a rumor, but there has been other individuals, such as I believe Andy Robertson of VGC, corroborating this report. So this is something that could be announced in the future. And again, it just shows Sony's aggressiveness so far this generation. Now, that is not the only rumor that Jez Corden reported, because besides the Konami properties coming to the PlayStation 5 probably in the future, we also have a new Dead Rising game being developed at Capcom right now. It is not going to be a Dead Rising 5. I believe that was canceled years ago, and there's actually going to be a Dead Rising reboot. Will the interest be there? Will this be like an Xbox exclusive or something? It's unclear. It seems to be very early right now with this project, but that is something that is coming eventually. And after Dead Rising 4, I just don't know if the interest is there anymore. I guess that is something that you guys can let me know down in the comment section. Now, Hogwarts Legacy is one of the biggest releases of 2023, and the numbers that continue to come out with this game, it's just astonishing how well it has done, as it has been reported that the game has topped 15 million sales and grossed over $1 billion, and this was right before the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and Nintendo Switch release just a couple of days ago, which those ports actually were well received, which is very surprising because it feels like all of the ports that we've been seeing recently all have been horrible within this industry. But for once, I guess the delay that they enacted Avalanche Studios, it worked. Respawn CEO Vince Impella was asked about Titanfall 3 during a recent interview, and he teased that he would love to see a Titanfall 3, but it won't be happening anytime soon. This has kind of been the rhetoric that Respawn has been giving to a possible new Titanfall game for, it feels like, the last 6 or 7 years. It does feel like it's eventually going to happen, but it's just a question of when, as the studio remains extremely busy with Apex Legends and obviously the Jedi games. And speaking of the Jedi games, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, obviously called one of the worst PC ports of 2023 so far, it has gotten a new update and such, and it has improved. The CPU performance is better, but the stutter remains, and on other platforms there continues to be issues. Myself, I finished the game, and just during some pivotal cutscenes, it was absolutely bonkers how badly the game was performing. The cutscenes were totally glitching out, which in my eyes, it's totally unacceptable, and this game needed much more time in the oven, which is something I've been saying about a lot of games recently. Now, fortunately, the modding community has been extremely busy with Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and some mod authors have already found some nice workarounds, some fixes to make the game, actually run properly, not in those low 20s as we've seen in various videos on social medias for the last couple of weeks. As one modder was able to do on the 40 series rigs, they were able to dramatically improve PC performance with a new DLSS frame generation mod. Again, this is only for those with 40 series rigs, but again, for those high-end PCs, this is music to their ears. The modder responsible, he said that they were able to find a major breakthrough because the mod generates perfectly clear fake frames instead of blurry ones, and in some cases doubling the frame rate that was previously possible. Mudohar, a popular YouTuber, also showed on a video of him playing the game in which you can see it clearly doubling, so it's great to see that some are enjoying the game, but it seems like there's just a lot more work for Respawn Entertainment. And again, this is just the nature of so many releases nowadays in which it's a wait to see when the game will be fixed. But Star Wars Jedi Survivor's team didn't think it needed another delay. This has been something that's been going around. A lot of people have been watching recent interviews with Stig Asmussen, who is the leader on this game, and some of it's just aged extremely poorly. We have this interview with IGN, which a lot of people have been talking about because of what Stig had to say about the game being delayed and them feeling that they didn't need another delay, which just didn't age all that well.
It kind of helped me understand how you end up landing on April 28th.
So when we first started having conversations about extending the date, I was asked how much time, and I said 6 weeks. That was exactly April 28th. That's no joke.
That's it.
But we stress tested that date. We looked at what else was coming out around the same time period, and we felt like it was a really good landing spot for us. Yeah. So we stuck with it. There was an option, do we want to extend it a little bit longer? But it's like, no, we can get it done. We need 6 weeks.
And remarks like this is what infuriates a lot of people. Within this games industry, we've been seeing a lot of really bad ports, and it's not because the developers, these publishers, don't know about the game not running all that well. It's just the mentality of we'll fix it later on. And with Star Wars Jedi Survivor, that's what happened here. It's quite clear that EA and Respawn knew that this game was going to have some hiccups and it was going to need fixes. It's just they didn't feel like they needed to push that deadline any bit further, because the game obviously did get a delay for a reason. Now, moving along in other news, BioWare has been having a serious shakeup the last couple of years. We saw, obviously, Casey Hudson, a lot of leaders at the company depart, and all attention is now on a new Mass Effect, and next year it looks like we're going to have a new Dragon Age game. It looks like it's going to have some God of War elements to it. Very interesting the direction that they're going to be taking with that game, but after the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, I'm back to being a little bit excited for BioWare games. It's just that I don't really have faith in their new team to make new games. I kind of just hope that they would make another remaster of the Dragon Age games, but doesn't seem like that's going to be happening anytime soon. But the BioWare that is here at the present, it's just everything I hear about them makes me more concerned for the future, and it does make me wonder how Electronic Arts would react to another failure from them. I just hope we don't get to that. But David Gator, a former writer at BioWare, he was there for years, opened up about some of his issues with the company recently on Twitter, saying, "Writing is one of those disciplines which is constantly undervalued. It is something that everyone thinks they can do. Even BioWare, which built its success on a reputation for good stories and characters, slowly turned from a company that vocally valued its writers to one where we were quietly resented with a reliance on expansive narrative seen as the albatross holding the company back." Maybe that sounds like a heavy charge, but it's what I distinctly felt up until I left in 2016. You remember what was being worked around that time? It was a game called Anthem, a game that made absolutely no sense for BioWare. It was a live service which ended up an absolute failure, and a story that I don't think anybody at all remembers anything at all about. But Gator does continue saying, suddenly all anyone in charge was asking was, how do we have less writing? A good story would simply happen via a magic wand rather than be something that needed support and priority. And that is the nature of BioWare, at least the last couple of years, and I do hope that we see some change, because I want another great Mass Effect game, and I just don't know if we'll get that from the current new BioWare. That's what I've been calling them the last couple of years, because this isn't the same BioWare. They've lost hundreds upon hundreds of developers that worked on those older games that we all fell in love with. Now, there also was something that was very interesting from PC Gamer, because they published an article titled "The Cinematic BioWare Style RPG is Dead. It just doesn't know it yet. Flashy blockbuster RPGs feel increasingly dated in the face of a tidal wave of fresh novelties." Now, what do they mean by that? Well, it's pointing to the fact that we have games like Cyberpunk 2077 and Mass Effect Andromeda, and there's been a lot of development trouble with making these games happen, and then having expansive options like different, paths for players to take, and it's just the inability of this industry to complete that task because of the fact that the budgets are getting insane, and it takes so much time to create this. That's why there's been a lot of attention on the indie scene in terms of RPGs. It's why a game like Disco Elysium was so critically acclaimed. And that's why it was very interesting that CD Projekt Red actually commented on this recent editorial, and specifically Pavel Sasko, a lead designer on Cyberpunk 2077 and The Witcher 3, remarked, saying that there was a lot of commotion between the lead designers at CDPR about the report, and Cyberpunk 2077's Pavel Sasko said in a recent roundtable at PC Gamer, everyone actually, after reading this article, said we mostly agree actually with the thesis, at least when it comes to AAA. We are just running at a effing wall, I think, and we're going to crash on that wall really soon. Sasko's comments above kicked off a discussion on the technology behind today's big budget games and the expectations players have for them. The wall Sasko referring to is the ballooning complexity and expense of making games like Cyberpunk 2077. It goes on. The Witcher 3 has so many effing tricks, Sasko said, explaining one in a particular way. It would often cut to a black to stage scenes or transition between bits of a quest, letting the developers spawn or despawn objects and change the weather or time of day. Sometimes there's a scene of a guy behind a bar and he's like submerged waist up to the terrain because we didn't have animation, so he's just sitting there, but he looks perfectly fine in that scene, and it looks like he actually matches and everything works. But the problem is here, then you look at Cyberpunk, no cuts, no black screens, you're in V all the time, staging is in person. It got so incredibly more expensive to generate branches. Adding branches to Witcher 3 was so easy in comparison to Cyberpunk. This article really sparked that discussion. And then PC Gamer further adds, CDPR's designers felt strongly that the no cuts first person perspective was important for the game, but Pavel said that they needed to find a solution for scalability of narrative. You want your story to be long but also be broad, so we had to try to provide all the branches and choice and consequences. Doing that with the current tools requires an enormous budget. And then former Dragon Age creator Mike Laidlaw said the primary challenge to him is controlling player expectations. As soon as you're delivering something that starts to be cinematic, you then are essentially inviting comparison to the most cinematic things, so you're kind of keeping pace with Naughty Dog or Cyberpunk. And ultimately, I find this interesting that CDPR is talking about this now, but this is the discussion that probably should have been happening before launch, because Cyberpunk 2077 isn't really an RPG, it's more of an action-adventure game. Obviously, you have that illusion of choice, specifically with the life paths. The life paths mean absolutely nothing after the first 10 to 15 minutes of the game, and for the most part, you play as a street kid within the game. And that is why there's a lot of pressure on Phantom Liberty, the expansion that is going to be coming up for Cyberpunk 2077, for CDPR to actually flesh things out, give players actual choice. But what CDPR is saying here makes me very much question how future games are going to be in terms of the ability to have these different paths and different things that you can do within them, because it sounds like straightforward narrative is something that this industry really wants, because of the fact that it just takes way too long to create something that has all kinds of different choices, and it just seems like it's a massive headache for these studios. But I also do think that a lot of this needs to be blamed on mismanagement and poor communication with players, because that is something that really did plague games like Mass Effect Andromeda and Cyberpunk 2077, in which these developers worked on. Next though, the Activision Blizzard Xbox deal is something that a lot of people are exhausted by, for good reason, as there's just been constant back and forth the last couple of months with regulators and Sony's objections. It's just become so annoying that a lot of people want to see this deal either get completed or finished. Just have this done, because I think everybody is annoyed with the headlines and seeing all kinds of conversation about it. But recently it did look like this deal was nearing a completion. There was an expectation that it could be wrapped up by this summer, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen at all. We did see this recently in March, that Microsoft was set to win the EU nod. That was encouraging news. It made a lot of people optimistic that the CMA, the UK's regulator, was going to rule in favor of Microsoft, but that's not what happened. The UK regulator actually rejected the deal recently. They cited cloud gaming concerns for the reason why. They believe that cloud gaming is really going to take off, and they look at Microsoft's position as being extremely strong, and they believe that Activision Blizzard being acquired could extremely hurt the UK gaming scene. It's an argument that seems more hypothetical, just because cloud gaming doesn't seem to be there, and I don't think it's going to be there where everybody thinks it's going to be in the next couple of years. I think we're still probably a decade or so out, just based on the infrastructure across the world, but maybe that's a conversation for another day. Either way, Microsoft right now is planning to appeal this. This is something that hasn't really got that much success in the past with the CMA, as their rulings have been very concrete. Whatever they rule, it pretty much stays that way. But Microsoft did hire an EU-beating lawyer to help overturn the regulator's ruling. We'll see how that pans out, and there has been some rumors that the appeal is going to be happening very, very soon in the coming days. So we'll see what they specifically cite for the reason why that they believe that the CMA is wrong about their ruling. But it has been reported also that the CMA's head was meeting with the FTC's head, and a lot of people have a suspicion that they probably talked about the Microsoft Activision Blizzard deal, something they're not supposed to do, but I mean, come on, it's pretty obvious that they had to have been mentioned, and they're obviously not going to admit it. Now, Microsoft right now is dealing with the aftermath of Redfall. This is something that is an absolute disaster for them. It has sparked a lot of conversation about the future of Xbox as a brand, something that I want to discuss more in depth probably later on this week. We did see Digital Foundry publish their own tech review of the game, calling it just another unacceptably poor port, and they point out everything that I pointed out myself in my own impressions that I gave in recent videos. It's just, the game looks horrible. There's just so many issues with it. Even IGN has published their own bug compilation, and yeah, you can see it right here. This is something that everybody's experiencing. The brain dead AI, in which enemies just are staying still, textures not loading. Let's see, you can see other type of vampires being stuck in walls. You got characters not appearing as they're supposed to. That is something that I enjoyed myself. You got characters floating in the air. That's more funny than anything else. You got characters floating around, well, your friends that are supposed to be with you, and yeah, other glitches and stuff. The game just needed a lot more time. Obviously, we can talk about the technical state, but the actual design of the game needed a lot more. I talked about it earlier on this video. There's just lots of design choices that were made that point to this game. I just don't know how management thought that this was a-okay to launch. And again, this points to Microsoft needing to be more hands-on. Now, I did find this funny. It's just that somebody sent me this, and I can't believe it, from the Redfall Steam reviews, and it looks like somebody who works for Bethesda support, probably one of those call centers in a foreign country. They just copy and pasted a Fallout 76 response, and I mean, it's to make a comparison, Fallout 76 is pretty much Redfall, this entire situation. Obviously, I think Fallout 76 is fundamentally probably a little bit better, in my opinion, but Redfall is just, it's another bad spot for both Bethesda and Microsoft. And right now it actually is one of the Steam's top 15 worst reviewed games, and the player base has already plummeted. I think it's going to be under 1,000 players on Steam, just zero interest in this game, and I imagine most of those people that ended up picking up copies for $70, remember that, this is a $70 game, probably ended up getting refunds. And I do have to wonder how many people are actually even spending $70 when you can get this game on Game Pass. But yeah, Redfall actually has fewer players on Steam than Borderlands 2, a game that came out, 10, 15 years ago. Crazy. But it is worth mentioning, on Microsoft's own platforms, the Xbox ecosystem, if that's what you want to call it, the Series XS, the PC, the game does seem to have some success in terms of player counts. It has been shown that the game is the 12th most played game on Xbox. Again, Microsoft doesn't actually give out numbers for sales or anything, so we don't really know how well the game is doing, but it does look like people are playing. It is worth mentioning that how many people downloaded the game and then immediately, quit the game and uninstalled. That is something that probably could factor into this total, because I know a lot of people did want to check it out for themselves, and many, like myself, just said, okay, after an hour, I think I'm done, and they turned this off. And it's much easier to give up on a game like Redfall because you're not spending that full price. You have that Game Pass subscription, and then you move on. But it does point to Game Pass needing some higher quality games for people to actually play for more than just an hour or so. But there has been all kinds of random rumors emerging the last week or so about Redfall. We had this one from a French retailer who apparently said that they were in contact with Arkane Lyon. It was that Microsoft never believed in Redfall, and Arkane Lyon is actually working on a more ambitious game, which I honestly kind of believe because of just how bad this game is. Other reporters such as Jeff Grubb have basically said the same thing. They heard it from their own sources. Microsoft knew for quite some time that this was not going to be a good game. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to recognize that this game in almost every facet is a disappointment. But there has also been some interesting reports from Windows Central which said that Xbox was not involved with Redfall. This is probably true because of remarks that Phil Spencer made in his recent interview with Kinda Funny Games. This is something that has been overlooked, but he made these remarks. It's very eye-opening, and it's very concerning that he even admitted this, and it does point to issues with the management at Xbox and how everything is structured right now. And with them supposed to get 10 or so more game studios if the Activision Blizzard deal goes through, I just don't know how they're going to manage over all this, and I don't know if they even have a plan for all of this. It's just madness in my opinion, but this is what Spencer had to say specifically in regards to Redfall.
Platform in our case. And we didn't do a good job early on in engaging with Arkane Austin to really help them understand what it meant to be part of Xbox and part of first party, and use some.
And just to say, isn't that Xbox's responsibility? They bought the company. That should be their responsibility to say, hey, we have the resources, here we are, we can help you out, let's take a look at the game. But I guess they didn't want to do that, or they didn't think to do that, which is just bizarre in my opinion.
Some of our internal resources to help them and kind of move along that journey even faster. So we kind of left them to go work on the game. They're a very talented team. I love that team, and I still do. And I will totally bet on them to do another great.
It was a talented studio working on a completely different project than they had ever made before. And with the other Bethesda studios in the past, from Machine Games, who worked on a multiplayer game with Wolfenstein Youngblood, that ended up being a disaster. Bethesda Game Studios with Fallout 76, that was a disaster. Even ESO from ZeniMax Studios. ZeniMax was a built-up studio that focused on multiplayer. They even had their own issues in the early days. I don't know why anybody expected that Redfall wasn't going to be without its issues, and the fact that I just don't think that Arkane was necessarily prepped for this type of experience. And that feels very different than any Arkane game that we've ever seen before.
But when Matt Booty and Jamie Leader, who's running ZeniMax, and I sit down, I think we could engage earlier with our different studios. And I do think there's a difference when we come in when the creative's already set on a game. That's not washing our hands of any of the creative. Every game we ship from our teams is an Xbox game. And so it's a full responsibility for it. I think we can do a better job with our internal team. We did a better job with Starfield. Again, nobody should believe it until they're playing the game. But that game was earlier on in production.
I mean, from what we understand, Redfall probably began development maybe 2016, 2017. Starfield technically probably was in development right around that same time, so I just don't really believe this. And they've owned Arkane, Bethesda for a couple of years now, so the fact that Xbox didn't have more of a role with this game's development is concerning for the future, but Phil Spencer does seem to indicate that they are paying a lot more attention to Starfield. Don't know why they couldn't have done that with Redfall, but here we are now dealing with the aftermath of that mess. Now, obviously, Xbox has all of their eyes on the Xbox Showcase, that is something that a lot of people are excited for because they're hoping to see gameplay for games such as like Avowed and Fable, games that were announced years ago, but we haven't seen or heard really much about it except for some very concerning insider reports. But there should be a bunch of time spent on Starfield and hopefully another hour or so on all of the other games that Xbox right now has in development. And my hope is that we're actually going to see gameplay and release dates. No more of this CGI cinematic nonsense. But on the opposite side of things, PlayStation remains busy. There have been some insiders such as Jeff Grubb of VentureBeat who recently announced that he has heard from his own sources that there is going to be a PlayStation showcase the week of May 25th. What will this include? That is a good question. And there's also been some other insiders that indicated as much, saying that there is a showcase coming up. So nothing is confirmed yet, but it definitely sounds like it is coming very, very soon. And the timing makes sense because PlayStation has done this the last couple of years. We should expect probably some Spider-Man 2 gameplay. Maybe we'll see Wolverine, Ghost of Tsushima 2. There's a lot of stuff that PlayStation is working on. There has been some rumors that the Konami products that are right now in development, such as Metal Gear Solid 3 Remake, Remaster, Silent Hill, Castlevania, maybe we see an announcement of that at that event. But yeah, we haven't really had that many big PlayStation or Xbox events. It seems to be just solely focused on the summer the last couple of years. COVID obviously plays a big role within that, but I'm excited. I want to see some new games. I'd love to see what PlayStation has in the pipeline, and the same does go for Xbox. So what do you make of these summer events? What are you hoping to see? Any surprise reveals? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video or if you found any informative value, and as always, consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.